Yo, what's up everybody, it's Tuna. Today's video, I wanted to talk a little bit about everything new with Lightning Arrow in the season 3.23 Affliction. So there's a few changes coming to this build. Much of this stuff is pretty much the same as it was in previous leagues. So I do recommend that if you wanted to have an in-depth build guide and want to prepare ahead of time, you should check out my build guide from last season, as everything there is still relevant aside for some of the changes that I'm going to be pointing out here. All of these things that I will be pointing out are not actually going to be present in my build guide, as I feel like some of these are quite niche and will apply to some people. If you want to actually incorporate all of these things into your build, that is totally up to you. There is no wrong way to play Lightning Arrow. There's a few things that you can do that maybe make your build worse, but overall you always have to tailor your build to your playstyle, and that is very, very important. Because for example, if some people don't want to do any sort of bosses and things like that, and they just want to rush maps, then you can take certain decisions that other people might not. So let's start first of all by saying Kaom Spirit, they're just dead. You do not want to be using this in your build in the future. There's too much downside for the upside now. They nerfed them pretty much from 100 to 300 regen required per rage regen. So that means that, like, if you were to have 9 rage regen in the past, with 900, you now need like 2,700 rage like life regen, which is just impossible to get realistically, unless you're completely bricking your character to do that, right? So yeah, we can no longer sustain rage with Kaom Spirit. That means that we are losing movement speed, we're losing damage, and we're losing damage reduction. All of these things, honestly, they're pretty substantial nerfs to the endgame variant of the build. However, we do actually mitigate this in the form that, like, we do no longer need actually to have rage regen. Therefore, we don't need any more life regen suffixes, so we can change those suffixes for other stats, and those stats benefit us in ways that, life regen otherwise did not. So you're not only losing by losing Kaom Spirit, you are sort of gaining some back, but overall, the loss of Kaom Spirit is going to be felt in the end game. Rage is just insane. Berserk is crazy, right? Like, it gives you a total of like 50% damage when scaled, 60% even in some situations, as well as a ton of movement speed. Yeah, it will definitely be felt. What is the replacement though? The replacement for us is going to be the Shadow and Dust unique gloves. You can also use any rare gloves, but I think Shadows and Dust are actually pretty damn insane. They were already actually an option in the past, but now they're even more compelling, just because we do no longer have to use Kaom Spirit. But what does Shadows and Dust give us? It gives us Rampage. Rampage is pretty insane. We'll talk a little bit about what that is later. But one of the main benefits of it is that it's very cheap and accessible. It's a super common unique. You'll be able to buy this early, so you can actually rush into your critical strike swap. As soon as you have like an ivory bone base or something like that with critical strike chance, you can swap onto crit, equip Shadows and Dust, and you'll be basically zooming through maps. You won't have to have any further investment into life regen and that kind of stuff to make it function. So that is the upside of it. It's much easier, much more accessible, and much cheaper. It is great early power boost. As soon as you put it on, you're going to be much faster and you're going to deal more damage. And, also on top of that, you're able to actually search for cheap corruptions, like Frenzy Charge, as well as base critical strike chance, attack speed, and that kind of stuff. And thanks to Vol Temple, these are going to be dropping double corrupted as well, so you might be able to snatch a Frenzy Charge, attack crit, or something like that if you're lucky, or if you have the currency, of course. And the last great benefit of these gloves is the fact that we are gaining the Suppression Mastery back. You can see here at the bottom the Suppression Mastery giving us 15% chance to suppress spell damage if equipped helmet, body armor, gloves, boots all have evasion rating. And since these gloves have an evasion rating, but the Kaom Spirit did not, as they were a pure armor base, what that means is that we are actually gaining 50% suppression from basically one passive point, as we are already taking the life and evasion wheel by Ranger. So that means that literally for one passive point, we are gaining 15% suppression, which saves us having to go out of our way to get suppression on our gear, and also potentially saving us extra passive skills on suppression, on extra suppression passives, right? So that makes itemization much easier, and it makes you able to get power much earlier. So that is a really, really nice buff for us in the early game and the mid game, going into late game, of course. So what is Rampage? Rampage is a kill streak mechanic. Basically what it is you're killing monsters, and as you kill them, you are gaining this buff, and this buff is going to give you 1% increased movement speed per 20 Rampage stacks, as well as 2% increased damage per 20 Rampage stacks. And this caps out at a total of, I believe it's 1,000. So yeah, once that's ramped up, you'll be much faster than you were. And also you will deal a ton more damage, right? So maybe at the start of the map, you will start a little bit slowly, but as you progress and you kill monsters, this stacks up pretty damn fast. You'd be surprised how many monsters are actually in your maps, right? And you'll be just much faster by the end of the map, and this buff has a duration, right? So you'll still have that buff up for the remainder of the map, as well as when you potentially get to the boss, right? Some of the downsides of this might include that you might feel rushed as you're mapping, but since you are going to be playing, obviously, a lightning arrow build, you know, that's not really going to be too much of a problem, as the build really excels at going fast and shooting monsters off screen and all that kind of stuff. So I just wanted to quickly demonstrate what that looks like. What Rampage looks like with Shadows and Dust on mostly just like a templated build, and you'll see what I mean by the speed ramps up. It's really nice, and it also has a cool little visual tied to it. You see here that as soon as I enter my map, I will gain, boom, there it is. That is the Rampage going on, and the Rampage is going to be giving me speed as I map along. And the faster I go, the more those kills stack up on the top left. And the more they stack up, the more speed I get and the more damage I get on top of that. So yeah, you can see that halfway through the map, I'm already at 400 stacks. And you know, this is going to scale linearly with juice as well. So the more monsters are in your maps, the more this is going to like basically ramp up. So you can get this to like 1,000 pretty fast in situations where you are juicy maps. But then you get to the end of the map. You know, you want to keep this mechanic up, but you want to kill the boss as well, and you still have the damage uptime for when you have the boss, right? It's really nice also if you're doing like Legion and all those kinds of mechanics, as well as Breach and that sort of stuff. So yeah, definitely a very strong mechanic, and something that I will be employing and also writing into all my guides, as it's very easy to equip, it's very strong, and you know, you just can't go wrong with it. It is nice gloves with decent stats on it, you know, critical strike multiplier and all that good stuff. Next, I wanted to talk about the new Rage technology. So this is one that has quite a bit of opportunity cost involved. However, it is extremely strong for people that want to be more focused around just mapping. So the Rage technology is very interesting because we are employing basically old tech in the form of Warlord's Mark. Since Warlord Mark got changed to what it is today, what it does is when you stun an enemy, you will gain a certain amount of rage over 2 seconds. And that rage can then obviously be spent by Warlord Mark. But of course, what's difficult is that you are actually not really able to trigger Warlord Mark consistently unless you are, of course, using a cast on crit setup. And since Mana Forged Arrow has been introduced into the game, this enables us to actually trigger this efficiently. You know, every pack almost, as we are basically critting every pack, and life tap is making sure that that Mana Forged Arrow is proccing as well every time. So what this does is it gives us rage on stunning marked enemies, and the mark transfer ascendancy is going to allow for this mark to be sort of like transferred from monster to monster, so that it increases the consistency as we're mapping as well. And what this does, of course, is it gives us Berserk again, which is insane. The buffs like that Berserk give you is massive speed for mapping, massive damage, and yeah. But it's not all upsides, of course. You are losing Sniper's Mark. So if you are lacking damage, this is not something that you might be wanting to do. You know, if you are lacking single target damage, it's still better to go for Sniper's Mark. You're losing some clear as well, as the Sniper's Mark's arrows would be splitting and doing all that kind of stuff. You cannot use both, of course, as Warlord's Mark is, of course, a mark, and you're only able to use one mark. So that is, of course, the downside. But the upside is that if you have this up while mapping, you will be consistently just more fast and stronger than you were otherwise, right? So yeah, and another downside is that, of course, because a stunning hit is not registered on an enemy if he is frozen, you actually need to have Secrets of Suffering or Gale Sight in order to enable this tech, right? This is a huge downside for me, as I think freezes and chills are very integral to the defenses of a Deadeye. However, the upside is, of course, that Berserk also gives you 20% damage reduction, so it's nothing to scoff at. It's really strong, and it is absolutely worth it since you want to be going faster and you want to be stronger while maps. This is what this build excels at, so it really plays towards the strength of the Deadeye. As you saw previously, we are linking it in a 5-link. This is pretty mandatory because we do need Cast on Critical Strike, we do need Mana Forged Arrow, and Life Tap. Life tap is a weird one. You think, why do you need life tap? And that is because of a mechanic of Mana Forged Arrow, is if you link it to life tap, it triggers on cooldown rather than, you know, as you're spending mana. And I will demonstrate exactly what that looks like right now. So if we look in game, I have a life tap setup linked to Culling Strike, Tornado Shot, Warlord Mark, Frenzy, and Mana Forged Arrow. So you can take the Tornado Shot out in this situation and run it on a 5 link if you want to, but I also put Tornado Shot in there just for consistency, as this will make sure that I am actually shooting arrows out to monsters and it's critting, and that crit is going to be basically triggering my Warlord Mark. You can see that if I take out life tap, you will see that it's proccing every few seconds, right? Every few attacks as I spend the mana. But if I was to put life tap back in there, see that it's proccing pretty much 3 times as fast. So this is ensuring higher consistency on that. And yeah, essentially it's making sure that Warlord Mark is triggering off of more monsters. And as I previously said, you do need this focal point ascendancy, because it's giving your marks transferred to an enemy when the marked enemy dies. Alternatively, you can also use the mark mastery here that says your marks transfer to another enemy when the marked enemy dies. The radius of this is quite small, but it's pretty mandatory to get good consistency on this. Something in there to keep in mind for sure. So let me just put in a Rage+Berserk gem right here, and we'll put in a map just to show you guys the consistency of this and how good it feels. So I put Gale Side for the sake of testing here. You can also put Interrogation so that you gain the benefit of Secret of Suffering. That means that you'll have an easier time reaching crit cap, as well as dealing a little bit of additional damage from Scorch and some damage reduction from Sap. So that is something to keep in mind as you are Trinity build. It's not all downsides. You know, losing Chill, Freeze, and Shock really does suck, but the upside of it is that you are gaining Berserk, and Berserk is just such a good buff. As you can see, it's like at the level 1 gem, 25% more movement speed, more damage with attacks, and more attack speed, as well as less damage taken. And of course, that scales up to 20% and 30% more movement speed. So you want to put that on left click with attack without moving, and you'll see that when I shoot enemies, eventually my Mana Forged Arrow is going to proc, and you see my rage now is up. And as I run through the map, you see it just keeps triggering, and as it triggers, I will gain more rage, and I will be able to maintain my Berserk up longer. And here it went down, but basically it's gonna recharge, and we're gonna incur the cooldown, of course. Actually, I better click this off so it doesn't muddy the speed. Essentially, yeah, we could just run through the map, and this is pretty consistently up all the time, so long as we are not freezing, and it's just generally actually a pretty good trade-off for what we gain, because yeah, the Berserk buff is something that we definitely want to have up while mapping. You know, it's going to increase our mapping efficiency basically like threefold. It's a multiplier to basically all of our damage, all of our speed, and all of that good stuff. So yeah, downside of course is that the single target, it does nothing. Like Warlord Mark does absolutely nothing for us on single target. But yeah, just gaining 20 rage over 1 second when a stun enemy, you know, when you hit a stun enemy, that's basically all that this provides us. But you may as well just look at this as this is what the curse provides you, and this is definitely a very strong alternative to what Sniper's Mark was previously giving us. Definitely very good technology, and I recommend you use this maybe if you if you're looking to get more of a speedy mapping setup and you feel like you have enough damage so you don't need to actually use your 6 link or your secondary 5 link on a Ballista or Mana Forged Arrow setup. Lastly, I wanted to talk about Mana Forged Arrow instead of Ballista. So this is an alternative for single target that people have been talking about and using. Notably, Havoc 616 has been doing some speed runs and you know, tests all the way to either Exarch as well as Uber Elder with both Artillery Ballista and Mana Forged Arrow setups, and he says that they are both comparable in terms of damage. However, he prefers one over the other. You know, the Mana Forged Arrow variant, for example, because for his sake, you know, he's saying that it's much better for his purpose as he's going faster. He doesn't really have to worry about dropping ballistas and that kind of stuff. So it's totally up to you which one you prefer. Artillery Ballista does actually insane damage once you are able to, you know, basically unload on a stationary target. But Mana Forged Arrow has the benefit you're not ever having to put the ballista down, therefore you're not losing any time on that whatsoever, and it's always active during maps. So if there's like maybe a tanky monster that is straggly there, it's gonna get basically shot down by your Mana Forged Arrow setup. And we are using the same technology, so we're linking it to life tap in that we're basically able to trigger that on cooldown rather than once every, you know, three attacks or so. Essentially, every couple of attacks, we're going to be triggering Mana Forged Arrow, and it's going to be supplementing our single target substantially. All right, so to demonstrate what that looks like, this is sort of what it's going to look like. We're going to put Storm Rain here into our Mana Forged Arrow setup. We're putting it in a 4-link right now. You can also put this in a 5-link or a 6-link, depending on what you prefer, you know, if you have the available sockets. So yeah, we're going to have Storm Rain, Mana Forged Arrow, elemental damage with attack skills, and life tap. And when you shoot, you're basically just going to be proccing your Storm Rain, and you're going to be proccing that as you run around. One of the downsides is, of course, that it does cost life, but since you are a Deadeye and you have access to instant leech, as well as an insane amount of leech in general, this is going to be sustained through by virtue of just attacking things and regaining your life on hit and stuff like that. So it's really nice in many cases because it allows you to not worry about ever placing down your ballistas. And in general, there's just a good quality of life change. However, it might cost you a little bit of damage for the upside of speed and quality of life. So that is something to consider. All right, so these are some of the things that you can actually include in your build. There's a lot of cool new tech. The build is very flexible and you can tailor it to your preferred content, right? If you want to have a more speed farming setup, you can always go for the more quality of life Mana Forged Arrow setup here, and also the Berserk technology, so that you can get faster mapping and have this more of like a Rampage type of feeling that you are keeping up your Berserk as you're stunning things, going along that way. At the, of course, downside of it being a less rounded character and having absolutely no benefit whatsoever on single target. So yeah, I will include some of these things in my build guide that is coming soon. However, some other things I might not include, as they might not be generically good for everybody. So it's more of a case of you are going to be able to tailor your build and your links to your preferred style of content. And I just wanted to put this video out there for the people that are interested in doing that kind of stuff. But for everybody else, of course, doing the lightning arrow setup that you have been previously doing in the past is also absolutely viable. It's just really cool to see all of these new things emerge. People are problem solving, seeing that Berserk is now nerfed in the form of Kaom Spirit being completely destroyed. So the solution being the whole Warlord Mark thing. It's really cool. Path of Exile is always, basically sparking innovation in the player base, and it's really, really nice to see. And I hope you guys have found this video helpful. I hope to, be putting out the Lightning Arrow build guide very soon for you guys, as well as some leveling tips and tricks, what to do through the campaign, as well as stuff like that. So look forward to that. And I really appreciate you guys' time. I hope to see you guys again soon. Peace out, everybody. Love you.